You can see there are objects following it. Yeah, there's two objects following it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a rocket launch, but what's following it? And see how bright they are?
Yes, I do.
And they're following it. And they're changing colors too. It's leaving a trail. The one that's dropping down away from it's leaving a trail. And then, wow, you could see the vapor trail. It's amazing. It's gonna go over the horizon. No, you sure don't. It's interesting that it's like, must be going parallel to the Earth because it's not dropping below the horizon very quickly at this point. It's staying almost, yeah, it's going, it just dropped below the tree line. Well,
I was only 7 years old, sleeping in my cozy bed in our San Francisco flat. My bedroom was part of an old San Francisco house turned into 2 flats years ago. We lived in the lower level flat. It was a cozy old building that was once a Victorian house, now modernized. As I sleep soundly, I had no idea what was about to happen to me. The most important experience of my life, and that it has been. Something totally unknown and strange was about to make itself known to me and forever change how I view reality. My life at this point had been average for a boy growing up in the 50s. My parents both worked and I went to school. I was an only child with no brothers or sisters. I had a large bedroom to myself that looked towards playland and the ocean. My interests were different than most kids my age. I had my eyes on the stars. I loved astronomy, art, science, and music. I still joke today that my first football was a telescope. I always wondered when I looked up at the night sky what was out there. This night, I would find out.
Now my mic's on, I think. There, can you hear me? I bet you can. Welcome back to Breaking the Silence. We got a great guest tonight, and I'm going to tilt my glasses so I'm not glaring at you. Before I bring Lisa on, it was this week that I came to, and someone was holding my arms back against me like this. They had their hands around my wrists. I tried pushing back at them, not out of fear, just pushing back. I could not believe the strength. And there were a hand over my eyes, and I could just barely see through the crack between the two fingers. There was the blue light. And for the first time, I really sort of got hold of myself, and I didn't panic. I didn't get scared. I did not try to resist. And I said, "Can I see you?" And they said, "No, not right now." Um, and there's probably more to it than that I don't remember. But when I came to, I knew what had happened. I knew it was real, and I thought about it for a while. And what came to me was that this was some sort of test just to see if I'd respond like the 500-pound gorilla on the table about to be tagged or something along those lines. Was I safe? Did I listen to the message that keeps coming to me about being calm, being focused, not reacting to my emotions? Because this would be the only way that we could have a real open communication. And that's what I got from all that. There's more. I'm not going to go into it more because I want to bring Lisa on. So um, here we go. Hey, good to see you
Hello.
again.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
We
much
just
for having me.
Well, sure. We just saw you recently because we did the Zoom call.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great interview.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Did you get a chance to look at the video and see if anything paranormal was occurring during it? Because that really got my
Uh,
attention.
I haven't reviewed the video.
Okay.
I've just transcribed the audio, but so far
You're
nothing in the
busy.
audio.
You're kind of busy. In fact, you've been really busy. Well, it was interesting that during the time we were doing the call that the camera kept dropping out, the internet's kept going down, it kept coming back. It was doing just all these weird things, and then you told me that this happens a lot. Now you've interviewed 18 people, is it so far now?
Correct. Yes.
Why don't you tell our wonderful audience, and they really are, what it is
I'm
you've been up
familiar.
to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me what it is you've been up to.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mhm.
So I'm Lisa Semmler. I'm a marriage and family therapist who's licensed in the state of Idaho, and I'm in the process of getting my PhD in integral and transpersonal studies from the California Institute of Integral Studies, or sorry, I need to correct myself. I'm getting a PhD in the integral and transpersonal psychology program. So my study is I'm a PhD candidate, and I'm in the process of performing a qualitative research study where I am interviewing people who have had direct contact with ETs or extraterrestrials, who then develop psychic abilities as a result. And the I want to explain for audiences, the term ET is just broad term so I can reach general audiences and they kind of know what I'm talking about. But I've noticed a lot of my participants have their own personal relationships with the entities, non-human intelligences, interdimensional beings, visitors, star family, however, the experiencer describes the encounters. But I use the general umbrella term of ETs, so that's how I refer to them for the study purposes. But yeah, so Steve was gracious enough to participate in my study, and it was very valuable. So the whole study, the aim of it is to figure out what is that connection between non-human intelligence, human contact that results in the human developing psychic abilities, whether they want to or not. And psychic ability is also an umbrella term for either the more well-known psychic abilities like clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, mediumship, telepathy, telekinesis, remote viewing, astral projection. But then it also is branched out to other energy forms of communication with increased other kinds of paranormal or parapsychological experiences, anomalous experiences, highly spiritual connections, whether that's pre or post-death communications with loved ones. It could be near-death experiences or electrical effects or technological interferences like what Steve and I were experiencing during his interview. Or it can be spontaneous medical healing that happens as a result of someone's contact with the visitors. So yeah, that's my study. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through. So I've done 18 interviews so far, but I still need about 6 to 12 more. So
Wow.
if anyone's listening to this and they wish to be a participant, yeah, they can contact me, or I think there's a link somewhere in the show.
Yes, there is. Mary put it up in chat, but she can also put it up down on the screen below. One of the things that, of course, I have learned, and many of us have learned who have been with this topic, with this subject, this phenomenon for a very, very long time, whether we're involved in it personally or just studying it, we will have found that all of the topics that you named are all connected with this experience of non-human intelligence interaction. A lot of people dig their heels in about it and say, no, they're not related. They don't connect, but they do. They absolutely do. And I will argue that. Well, I won't argue. I just will put my foot down and say that's how it is because I'm experienced with it. I have the experience just like you do. And so you have found in your studies that most of the people you've talked to not only have had seen craft, have interacted with non-human beings, but they've also seen their loved ones who have passed on,
Yes.
and experienced other paranormal activities and have abilities, which is a broad label for the many things that you have brought up. And the thing about the skepticism about having contact with dead loved ones, I've seen far too often is that, well, they're dead, so you miss them, so you're going to have dreams and you're going to fantasize about seeing them. But what if they're 24 years old and they're just spending the night over at a friend's house, not with you that night, and they die in their sleep and they were perfectly healthy, and you have a meeting with them where they come and tell you that they love you and they're going to leave. And then later on, you find out now you had seen them. They came to you. They took you out of your body or whatever Judy did to me. And I saw the way she was dressed or not dressed, partially dressed in detail. And then later found out that's how they found her. So how do you explain that away? And I'm not the only person that's had those kind of details with regards to experiencing loved ones coming to you that had just passed.
Right. Well, so I can't say that that's been my personal experience, but I've had pre and post-death communications with loved ones, including pets. Pets are part of our soul family. But I can tell you, as a psychotherapist who specializes in transpersonal psychotherapy, a good portion of my client base are people who have these kinds of experiences. And so when I hear these stories, and, quite often people will narrate their experience, something in the terms of, hey, a weird thing happened. I don't know how to make sense of it, but here's what happened. And so when I, receive those stories, it's like, oh, yeah, let's evaluate. How real did it feel in the moment? How did you make sense of it when you woke up?
Yeah.
And how did it resonate with you when you found out your loved one actually did pass away? Because
Yeah.
that in itself is the meaning of transpersonal. When you break that word down into Greek, it's beyond ego. So it's all the ways that humans have these experiences that are spiritual in nature, or they're religiously related, or something beyond themselves or their awareness of reality, where it affects them. So whether that's, you're in a deep meditative state and your mind goes somewhere else, it was real. Or if you are someone who experiences, psychedelics, if you have an experience that you can't point a camera at it, you can't prove to someone else it happened, but it changed you either for the better or the worse, or it provided a new reality or a new framework to do life, it changed you. And so, yeah, that's when I hear stories like that, it's like, wow, let's explore that and see how it affected you and how do we integrate that new information.
It's interesting because I remember the whole experience. I was asleep, but I was conscious, right? So I remember it consciously, and I never thought to maybe there's more to it, to have a regression to see if there's more. But it was so vivid and so real. I woke up completely confused. Just like the last thing I'd ever think is that Judy had died during the night. I mean, she was 24 years old, and I was 26, and it just that was a weird dream. What was that all about? And because I was so involved in Hollywood and the fact that there was a film that morning that was premiering at Roger Corman's studio, and I needed to get to it and see it. It was called Battle Beyond the Stars. Some people here will remember that film. I did a lot of creatures for it and stuff. That I was such a hurry to get to that, I kind of put it out of my mind till I got home. And then when I got the messages, I was just floored. And when I remembered the dream, even more so. And it just changed me forever. That was her intention, because she was such a skeptic about life after death and UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And she used to tease me about it. And she was very sweet how she did it. It wasn't mean, but she just had to make a beeline to me because she had brain aneurysm during her sleep. So
Yeah.
I'm sure this is not the first time that you've heard this kind of stuff. And of course, the other
Yeah.
problem is with skeptics and debunkers is that they'll say, "Well, you just made it up. You knew she died, and then you just made all that up." Okay, but you know what? You don't have any proof. They don't have any proof that I did that.
Right.
And so the whole business with life after death is that science has no proof that we don't continue on. We have more evidence to substantiate that there is something to it. So
Right. And the automatic dismissal, because science hasn't proven it, is uniquely a Western automatic response.
oh well, yeah.
Other cultures, these kinds of concepts are very ingrained. And so in Eastern cultures, indigenous cultures, African or South American cultures, these topics are so normalized, they don't call them paranormal. It's
No,
just normal.
it's just normal.
And so the label of paranormal or weird or unbelievable, that is a Western reaction to the phenomena that goes on around us.
Yeah. So you yourself have been having um, normal experiences,
Yes, anomalous phenomena.
and experiences with non-human intelligence. Is that
Correct.
what, obviously, or maybe not so obviously, I don't know, is that
Mhm.
what got you involved in the field of research you're in, and your PhD and all that?
Yeah. Well, it didn't start out that way. So my and just so your audience knows, I kind of already explained this to Steve. So, I I love talking about my experiences with people, but for the purposes of the integrity of my study, I can't reveal too much about myself because I don't want to inadvertently, taint future participants' narratives. So my first encounters started when I was about the age of 4. And so I had an encounter when I was 4. I wasn't afraid of it. I was more curious, but really I had ontological ambivalence about it. So I wasn't afraid. But I just kind of observed and was like, that's strange. Okay, I should probably tell my parents. And I remember it very vividly. I remember having a conversation in my head, like, what is that? Why? I should tell someone, right?
Did you?
What's that?
Did you tell?
No,
See?
I
There
didn't
you
tell
go.
a soul. In fact, I
That's what
remembered
none
it
of us
so
did.
vividly, but I was raised in extreme religious household. And so I remember thinking, well, I'm not going to tell anybody. They'll think they'll give me a negative label if I tell anyone. And so I didn't tell anyone until I was 40 because I had a really remarkable psychic reading with a woman who lives in British Columbia who I'd never met before. And I got her phone number through a series of synchronicities by just chance meetings that I'd had with other people. And I scheduled a phone interview with her, and I had prepared a list of like 14 things that I was hoping she would answer for me. And about 40 minutes into the call, she'd answered almost everything. And then she said, what other questions do you have? And I said, okay, because her particular gift was connecting with spirit, like my spirit guides or my angels, my team, to ask questions for me. So one of the questions was, hey, an odd thing happened when I was about 4 years old. I've often wondered, was that just a dream? Was that just my childhood imagination? Because it was very real. I've never forgotten it, but I've never spoken about it to anyone. And so I don't know how to make sense of it, but I know what I saw. And that's all the detail I gave her. And then she continued to say, yes, your guides are telling me that blue being that you saw in the hallway in the middle of the night was putting you back in bed. And then she went on to describe what it looked like. And she described what my household looked like in the small little town in Nebraska where I was born and lived until I was 6. She described the surroundings of the neighborhood where the house was. And so all of those details of describing the creature and what the encounter was, those are words that I'd never spoken in my entire life. She was the very first person to ever reflect back to me my story, and she was 100% accurate. So it was that moment that I was like, okay. And so that was 2020 when that conversation happened. 2018 is when I first enrolled with the California Institute of Integral Studies. So when I started that program, it was another series of synchronicities that made me find CIIS and the ITP program there. And when I first started, I just had a broad sense of, what do you want to study? Because integral and transpersonal psychology is kind of like, I affectionately describe it as, it's like Hogwarts for adults. If you want to describe the mystical, the magical, the lovely things about mysticism or spirituality, that's the place to be. But I was still so nervous and afraid to tell anyone that I wanted to study people who have had ET encounters. Because even though I had that first moment when I was 4, my psychic ability started developing when I was 7. And so that was more confusing to me than the ET encounter, because again, I didn't want to tell anybody what was happening because I thought they wouldn't believe me, or I thought that they would say, oh, you're just making up stories. So I just never told anybody. And so then throughout my life, so many paranormal experiences. I used to label myself as someone who lived in a haunted house. And then I kind of figured out, oh, it's not the house that's haunted. This thing travels with me. It's me. So I had
Yeah.
no language for these things. And so I didn't know how to talk to anybody about it. So then I start CIIS. I have a general idea of what I want to study. And then COVID happens. So then COVID basically shut down all research efforts for the academic community for a year to a year and a half. And in that year and a half is when I learned when the COVID shutdown was over, and I learned that there's this nearly 800-page book that was published called Beyond UFOs, that was published by the free organization, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, and had a 3-hour conversation with one of its authors, Ray Hernandez, and said,
Mhm.
okay, I got to nail down my topic for what I have to do for my dissertation. And so I had a conversation with him about all the ways of different human experiences that study explored. And one thing I noticed about all the research that I had been doing that's been published for the past 40, 50 years, so much of it has mentioned a lot of experiencers report developing psychic ability after their contact, but no one had done a deep dive into, well, let's hone in on that small little piece of it and figure out why, how did that happen? And so that's kind of where I was like, aha, that's the little niche. That's the thing I want to study, because that's the question that it's hinted about, but no one's answered it. So that's how I arrived at my topic. And then it
Wow.
just happened to be that it fell in line with my own experiences. So
Yeah.
it really wasn't an intentional narrowing down, but it kind of worked out that way. So works for me.
And so you are finding, I know you don't want to talk too much about your findings because it's, but you are finding that people do have abilities. And
Yeah.
This is kind of a different question to ask regarding that. But ever since I've been very little, I've had this hearing. I'll give you an example. I ran a studio where we did creatures and monster effects and stuff, and some of the guys were angry, or not angry, but upset with me because we had to work extra late and stuff, and they were saying things to each other about me, and they were a good distance away. I heard everything they said, so I walked over and repeated it to them just to give them a chill. But I also I remember the first time I noticed it, it was that I was in a restaurant with my mom. I was very young, and I could hear what people were saying in all the tables, and I could hone in on them and listen to them individually, or there was so much chatter I would have to shut it out. And to this day, I don't know if I was hearing them or was I hearing what they were thinking, what was going on there. And have you had any one talk about such a thing, about having exceptional hearing that they might have been confusing for a telepathic ability? Because it does feel that way.
I don't know if I've had any research participants tell me that. I've
One
had
just
other
did.
people I know.
One
Other
just did.
people who other people who aren't a part of my study, because one of the stipulations of my study is my personal friends or my clients or anyone
Mhm.
who's, a personal associate of mine is not allowed to be a part of the study.
Mhm.
And so I know people who have reported that, where when they're in the, I guess, development and integration of this psychic ability, are trying to figure out, I know I heard that sentence, I know it came from so-and-so, but I didn't see their mouth moving. And so it's confusing, and they do have to try to figure out, was that my imagination? But then somehow they get a confirmation when they're like, okay, you didn't say it, but you said it 10 seconds later.
Right.
So I knew you were going to say it. So I hear things like that all the time. I don't know if there's a word for that, though, besides
Me neither.
telepathy, developing telepathy. Yeah.
And then there's like what happens to me, and I know it happens to other people. I think we talked about this during the interview about the store I went into. It was a very, very old house from the 1800s that had been turned into a store, and this young woman started talking to me, and I felt ill, and the whole place was I felt unbalanced, very heavy. I felt this many times before, afterwards, but I mean, she was talking to me, and I'm with people who know nothing about my abilities or my having an interaction with non-human intelligence. And here's this young woman saying that she knows I sense her, and that I can see her, or know that she's there and hear her, and she was pleading for my help. And it was really emotionally upsetting. I had to leave the building right away. I felt bad about doing that, but I had to get out of there. Um, have you come across that?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I'm thinking of stories I've heard of other people where their gifts are not only confusing to them, but they're confusing to other people as well. And so, and I know people who have said, I'm uncomfortable with making other people uncomfortable, or I know things that I probably shouldn't know things, so I'm just going to back away and shut this off. And so I don't know if you ever went through that where you're like, this is too weird. I'm going to stop all this. I'm not going to engage. But I've heard of that happening where things get a little too weird and people don't quite know what to do with it.
Yeah, no, it happens. And the sad thing about it is that a long time ago, as you said, these abilities, these awarenesses, these connections we have with the cosmos were not paranormal. They were normal. They were part of our everyday existence. We connected with animals. We could hear their thoughts, but it was more like they project to us. And I get the feeling that they communicate that way. They're very telepathic because they've never been told they're not. And we
Right.
have. And it's that simple that somewhere along the line, the people that want to control the masses told them through various means, which I won't mention on this show. I think we all know what they are, that you don't have any abilities.
Right.
You're not connected with nature. You're not connected to everything around you. And so we slowly turned off our abilities or shut them down as you were, this is too weird. I'm going to shut this off. And people did. Not to mention being burned at the stake wasn't helpful either. Because let's face it, those people, so many people. Well, you go back in time and people were curing miraculously to the locals. They were curing people by using herbs in the science of working with herbs and plants naturally to cure illnesses. Instead, they were accused of being witches and they were killed because of the fear. And so over time, here we are. When you're dead, you're worm food. You don't survive after you die. You don't have any abilities. That's all garbage. Don't listen to people who say that. And it makes it very hard to study it. Someone here was saying that you're going to be the new Dr. Mac.
I will happily take on that role. I'm a big fan of Dr. Mac's work.
We all are, because he was a gentleman. He was a really nice, sincere man. And look what they tried to do to him. They couldn't burn him at the stake, so they did the next thing, best thing. They ran him over. So, not to mention all the other things they did to him before that happened.
Right.
So, it's a tough thing to explore, and but it's what's so frustrating about it is it is so natural. It is so much part of us. I mean, if you study the indigenous people of this country alone, and Australia too, they all had contact with what they called the sky people, the star people, the Wangina from the Dreamtime, who created the earth and all the creatures. It's there, and if someone woke up in the tribe and said, gee, I had this dream, I went to this other world, and how wonderful, and they shared it in their stories, but in our culture it's not so wonderful. So we're trying to make it that way, though.
For sure. And that's part of my interest in studying these things in an academic capacity, because academia requires you must prove that you know what you're talking about. You must use evidence-based research. You must use research that is valid enough to be published in an official journal. And so it requires that one actually prove here is the logic and the history and the science behind what this topic is. And because we don't have a physical body of an alien on someone's lawn, that people are like, well, until that happens, they're not real. And it's like, okay, but you can't ignore the decades of probably millions of people's personal accounts across the globe. There is no culture, no socioeconomic status, no religion background, no racial or gender diversity background that is excluded from ET contact.
No.
And so throughout history, indigenous cultures, ancient cultures, they all have some kind of narrative that's been passed down, or artwork that existed way before mass media, or even before a television or a radio existed. So there is evidence for these things. But like I said earlier, Western culture uniquely is like, hey, we need a body to study, or else these things aren't real.
Well, there's plenty of them at various places that we know of, and they ought to
Right. We just
go
can't
drag them
visit.
out. But the funny thing about it is, I did a film called Foo Fighters, and I'll make it a short story, but it's about World War II squadron that shot down a Foo Fighter, a UFO, back in World War II, and they recovered things from it and kept it secret until the last one of them died. And when the news reporter came to the house and he took them to a freezer to show him the body they found, he discounted it. He said, I could fake that. That's probably just rubber,
Right.
So you have that problem to deal with
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and part of
thank you.
my clinical background
Thank you very much.
is I'm trained in hypnotherapy, regression therapy, spiritual emergency therapy, and EMDR. So all of those are various forms of trauma therapy.
Mhm.
And I'm also trained in differential diagnosis to figure out what is specifically a spirituality related problem, what is mental illness, and when is someone's story both. When can anomalous things occur to someone and they also have mental illness? And so when I have clients who come to me to say, I've got a wild story to tell you, please don't think I'm crazy.
Oh, yeah.
My first thought is, all right, let's go, let's hear it. But I also use a skeptical mind of, well, you might have a history of this, you might have a history of this, but then you also might have a lived experience. And so as I get to know people and figure out their life and their story, honestly, I can say I don't know that I've come across too many clients where I thought their paranormal story was actually just mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know how to ask the differentiating questions of, well, let's explore this and see if indeed you are crazy, as a lot of people call themselves. I don't call them crazy. But a lot of people do put themselves in that category because they don't have any other way to explain what happened to them. So I like to normalize for people the odd things that happen in the world that they don't want to talk to about.
Right. So it is possible to have schizophrenia and also have contact with non-human intelligence.
Right.
Have you run
And
into that? It probably be rare, but
I've so yeah, I do actually have a former client of mine who I suspected had some kind of schizophrenia related disorder, and also had paranormal experiences. And so the differentiating part is being able to ask the person, what was your experience? How did you interpret it? How did you interact with it? Did you write it down? Did you sketch it at the time? Did you tell anybody about it? And so when they live with other people, it's like, okay, do you have audio or visual hallucinations? And if so, do other people see or hear them too? So then if you live in a household where spooky things happen, you can have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder with psychotic features. You can have, a substance use disorder that has psychotic features. You can be extremely exhausted because you haven't slept for 5 days and have hallucinations. And you might also live in a haunted house. And so it's like, okay, well, other members of your household have reported seeing the same thing as the person with mental illness. So we can reasonably validate a spooky thing happened to them. And then we can also treat them for the other symptoms that they're demonstrating, like, severe depression or how the hallucinations might impact their life. Okay, let's cope with those and figure out what to do with them. And also these spirits who bother you and your other household members. Let's get everybody on board with setting some boundaries. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
You've probably run into this too. With my late wife, she was convinced that I was having a midlife crisis, that I probably needed help. All her friends were calling her and telling her this because they saw me on TV, on talk shows with Levon and Whitley and even Roger Lear, and said, your husband's really got a real problem. And she really bought into that. When it came finally to a point where there were undeniable things that she was witnessing that said differently, she actually believed that I was influencing her to be crazy herself. I was causing her to see things. She was denying what she was experiencing. Have you run into that?
Not personally.
In families? No, you haven't.
I've
some lucky
not,
people.
Yeah, I've not personally run into a real life example of someone else blaming their contact related person. I mean, I have met people who have had shared experiences. I mean, I'm in my office right now. I've been in session many times with people when paranormal events happen during session.
Right.
I have a little journal to mark it down and the date and the time, and I don't put client names in the journal, obviously, but I write down everything that happened. And so there's two of us here, like one of them specifically, it was kind of interesting. So I was with a woman and I actually have tea here. But so she was holding her cup of tea like this, and she was going to say something, but she wanted to take a drink first. So she like went like that. But before she actually made contact with her cup, a whistle came from the side. And she kind of was like, and then right when she did that, her little tag kind of like flipped around while she's holding it like this.
Wow.
So it's little things like that happen.
So is this in your house? Is this spirit in your house? You
no,
think,
this
or
is
did it come with you?
This is my office. It's separate from my house.
Okay.
But
We do that too.
It is in a very my office is in a very old building, and it's right next to the Boise River. So there's a big water source nearby. There's a very old historic cemetery right up the hill. And I've had other kinds of paranormal experiences that happen in my office, whether I'm with somebody or not. And I've had clients who come to me to say, hey, these weird things are happening. I don't know how to deal with it. And so we talk about, okay, well, how would you deal with a human person who is disrespecting your boundaries? How would you deal with, if it's a phantom odor that happens and you're like, boy, that smells like my grandfather's cigar, but he's been dead for however many years. It's like, okay, well, if grandpa was around, would you say, hey, nice to see you? Or would you freak out and go, oh my gosh, it's a ghost? Like, well, you can choose the more positive one. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that is common too, the smells.
Mhm.
You know, just a minute ago, well, that's a little while ago, I was smelling sage burning, and we're at our film studio, and it's not
Hmm.
that old. I think it was probably built during the 60s, but I smelt it the other day too, and Mary was not burning sage. We get a lot of this at home as well. One of the
Yeah.
things that grabbed my attention is you mentioned that you had a large source of water nearby,
Mhm.
which would indicate to me that you have an understanding about the effects of flowing water and what it can attract or give energy to. I mean, we know about this from ley lines and the fact that most of the ley lines in the world seem to run under some of the most mysterious monuments in the world, such as Stonehenge for one, and many of the other stone circles that obviously back in that time, the people had a knowledge of water. It wasn't just
Mhm.
Brian Eno who sung "Under the Rocks and Stones, There Are Water Underground." They were doing it too. So, um, what do you know about that? Because that really caught my attention when you said you were near
About
a source of water, flowing water.
Oh, about
Yeah,
water?
yeah,
Well, my frame of reference for it was just water is a big source of flowing energy. So when
yes, it
you've
is.
got, and when you have a lot of energies, whether they be ancestral spirits or for people who, Wendigos or Sasquatch is a part of their experience or their belief system. Um, those energies are also kind of tied to land and land energy. And
Right,
so when you've got water that is a source of energy that flows and moves, um, so to me, it stands to reason that something that is looking for an energy source would hang out near water. I know a shaman who, uh, uh, if he happens to see this, I hope he forgives me for muddling this, said something to the effect of because there's a cemetery literally half a mile away. It's very large. It's a lot of the headstones are from the 1800s.
hmm,
Um, and so he kind of described it as, you have all these energies that are laid to their final resting place up the hill. And then all they have to do to come down and flow to the underworld. And that doesn't mean hell, but
no,
just to,
no, of
to,
course not.
you know, that it makes sense that spirits would be coming through this building. We're right in the way.
Right,
So that's kind of where, when it comes to my own personal beliefs in ghosts or spirits or paranormal phenomenon or Sasquatch or ET, it's all energy based. And so, so to me, it's not out of the realm of possibility that when you've got an energy source of flowing water, that increased spirit activity would also be present.
wow. I think that most people here tonight would um, can remember a time when they were sitting at a flowing creek or river, especially a river, um, in the country and just on the edge of it. That I noticed this from the time I was a little kid, that there's just this power, this energy from it that I really enjoyed being in the presence of. Um, I'm thinking back on it now. I think I can understand why I was so attracted to that. Plus, I liked fishing
Mhm.
back then. I was good at it, but
Yeah. Well,
wow.
and there are studies that have shown that just physically being next to the ocean takes away toxins from your body that relieves stress for you. Or if you are someone who likes to garden, so people who have the palms of their hands, or if they go out onto the earth barefoot, that the elements of earth or water actually like remove toxins from your hands and your feet. So people who garden or people who are out in nature barefoot tend to have lower levels of anxiety and depression. So there's
Lisa,
something to nature healing us.
Lisa, you had a description given to you
Oh,
about the entity that you saw, and this person wasn't there.
mhm.
Is that something you can share with us? The description?
Sorry, will you describe it again? Because I can't see the chat. I don't know. What were you saying?
No. I was asking you if you could describe the entity or being, non-human intelligence that was seen by the person that you talked to, who in the beginning of the show, she said that, and she described the being to you.
Oh, the psychic.
Yes, the psychic that
Okay.
she could not
Yeah.
have known if any other way.
Yeah, correct. So she's someone who, so part of my training in hypnotherapy and regression therapy required that I drive from Idaho to Mount Shasta in California. So it was,
Wow.
over a span of several months to complete all of that training. So I was in Mount Shasta a lot, and I stayed at the same Airbnb. And my Airbnb host, I got to know her really well. And there was one occasion where I met her friends, and one of her friends was a shaman who said, I've had an ET encounter. I got this massive download in my truck. I got a name of a stranger and a warning and a message saying, you need to give this message to this man. So I'm listening to the shaman going, oh, wow, that sounds like an ET encounter. And he's like, exactly. And so he is the one who said, because back then, that was probably 2019. So back then he said, hey, if you've got your own curiosities, you should call this psychic. And I would say her name, but I don't know if it's kosher to mention names if people don't
That's
want
okay.
that.
No,
There.
you don't
But
have
anyway,
to.
she's a very talented psychic living in British Columbia, and also has a lot of ET connection.
Mhm.
And so, so when she was describing it to me, so part of it was the last two questions on my list that I had was, will you please tell me what that thing was when I was about 4 years old? Was it my imagination? Was I dreaming? Or was that real? And if it was real, please tell me the events, like what happened. And then the other question was, in 2019, I was out of town and I was in California, and my mom stayed at my house to take care of my pets while I was gone. And my mom had a weird experience where she saw green orbs floating around in my backyard. And she had said, hey, you got visited by angels while you were out of town. And I was like, well, no, they would know I'm out of town. Whatever was there, they were there for you. And so I asked the psychic about that. I was like, can you settle the bet? Like, were they there for me? Were they there for my mom? And this woman went on to describe, she said, oh, they were definitely there for your mom. And here's why. And she gave all these reasons of things that were going on for my mom at the time in chronological order. And she said, so that's why they were there to help her that night. So those were confirmations where I'm like, no one puts out on the internet what my mom is going through, and when I say chronological order, she described things that had happened for my mom over the span of like 5 years. And so it's like, wow, okay, this is so extremely validating. And and in this phone call, this psychic knew what I was wearing because I had, had just come from a yoga class and I was still in my yoga attire. And so when we met on the phone, this was not a Zoom call, this was just phone call.
Right.
She didn't know what I was wearing. But she started the phone call by saying, I'm connecting with your spirit guides, and your primary one is dancing around in Lululemon yoga attire. I don't know what to make of that. Spirit guides don't need to wear clothes. I don't know why she's really showing off her yoga attire.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm wearing yoga attire. So it was a life-changing phone call. She validated so much. And to even describe the house I was born in Nebraska was quite something.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, my yoga attire is a t-shirt and my pajamas. We do yoga.
Works.
We do it every morning.
Whatever you're comfortable
we meditate first, and we find that meditation is really important, and Do you meditate?
I do. I have a different, I mean, I don't meditate per se like other people might. Like, I dedicate time and space to have, I guess, communion with my spirit teams.
Mhm.
But I'm a little fussy about it. So
A
I
little
like to
fussy.
have all the candles, all the crystals, all the singing bowls. So I like to make it a big production. I know
Oh,
that some people say your spirit team doesn't require that. You can just tap in and talk to them. But
yeah, but you know what? That's what makes you feel comfortable. That's what empowers you, and I
yeah.
understand it. It's ceremony. You know, we human
Mhm.
beings have been doing ceremony to communicate with the spirits since the beginning of time, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary's saying we have an altar too, and it's
Yeah.
crystals and singing bowls and the whole bit.
Yes.
And in
Protect.
fact,
Yes.
the
And
whole
I
room
actually.
surrounded by stones that are painted on with Aboriginal symbols and
Mhm.
you name it. But it's I
Yes.
find it very comforting.
Right. And so, yeah, because I do make it a big production like that, I usually I like to use moon energy. So I do a lot of my things on either the full moon or the new moon, or if there happens to be an eclipse. So I like to use moon energy to do manifesting, or just to commune with spirit and see what happens. And synchronicities seem to be the biggest way that my spirit team communicates with me.
Right.
So when something peculiar happens and I observe it and go, I don't know what this is. It's odd. It's out of place, but I think it's a breadcrumb. I think they're tossing me something and saying, pay attention to this. It'll make sense later, but you'll need this information later. And it's been so lovely to have synchronicities, because then it's so confirming, like, really, I should take that big leap and do that thing. But then they just keep giving confirmation. It's like, yes. So, and when I was figuring out psychic abilities, I never made the connection that, oh, they talk to me through song lyrics or movie quotes. So when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, why is this really annoying song stuck in my head? I haven't heard this song for
Oh, you
decades.
too. You too. You wake up with a song in your head.
Yes. And then I go, what? Why? This is so irritating. Get out, get out. I don't want to listen to you right now. But then something about my day will happen and I'm like, oh my gosh, that person just said the lyrics of that song that was stuck in my head this morning. And so it's things like that where it's like, okay, I see it. I need to pay extra attention to what this person is saying to me right now. So that's kind of how I use it or talk to them. But or sometimes if I feel like I'm struggling with something, I'll take many moments to meditate, like in my car, like if I'm about to drive, or if I've just parked somewhere, I'll take a few moments in my car to just recenter, shake off
Sure.
whatever energy I'm
Sure.
holding on to that I don't want to hold on to.
Well,
Yeah.
you got me worried because the last few mornings I keep waking up hearing the theme music from Twin Peaks. What does that mean? Well, we did lose David 3 4 days ago. David Lynch himself, and
Right.
um, that was a big blow. But you know, Twin Peaks for me, brings back a lot of really great memories, and so I think that's just rattling around in my head. So, um,
Yeah.
but I do wake up hearing pieces of music that just I don't know why I wake up hearing it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
After the elections, I woke up hearing instant karma. I still haven't to figure out what that means.
Oh man. Well, do you ever write it down like in a little journal? Do you go, I don't know what
Oh,
this is for, but I'll figure it out later?
about the journal, is this something that you recommend to everyone? Because
Mhm.
Yvonne, when I was going to Yvonne for hypnotherapy back in the 90s, and we did 30 or more sessions on my experiences, and she had me keep those little black blank books, and I would write down every morning what happened. And when I showed it to her, like at the end of a week, she was overwhelmed because so much had happened. I mean, it was almost every night in some weeks. It
Yeah.
was really prolific. And so unfortunately, and I told you about this, all those books were lost. I still had them.
Yeah.
They got destroyed in the flood. So um, when I had that experience this week with having my arms held back in the communication with them saying, "Can I please see you?" Mary said, are you writing this stuff down? And I thought, well, the one part of me is like saying, well, you've done that before. Why is it important? But then something else said to me, no, it is important. Write it down. So I've started doing that again. Is that something you recommend to people here who have experiences?
100%. Because and that's a lesson that I had to learn myself. Because so I'm one of those people who, when I was starting to figure out, okay, these paranormal events, these psychic, I have a lot of precognitions. So I have things either pop into my head and I'm like, that's weird. That's not my thought. Why am I thinking about that? Like,
Yeah.
one of the most radical ones, I was just doing something mundane and this thought popped into my head of, I wonder what it would be like to be bit in the eyeball by a spider. And I thought, oh, why are you thinking about that? Where'd that come from? Why? Gross. And then I started just deliberating in my head going, well, I mean, that wouldn't actually happen because like the eyelashes are protective features. And then I was like, Lisa, gross. Stop thinking about that. Where did that even come from? And so I just put it out of my head. Like, that was weird. And then like 2 days later, I was invited to someone's like at home party, and they had like buffet style food. And so I was standing in line next to a woman I didn't know. And I just kind of was like turning around, and there was a woman standing behind me with an eye patch. And it didn't click. And I was like, oh no, what happened? And she said, oh, damn spider bit me. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so my precognitions happened that way. And when all of that was happening for me, that was probably like 15 years ago when I started to have those. I
Mhm.
didn't write it down. I just thought, oh, that's weird. Woo. And then it
Yeah.
wasn't until a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, that I'm like, hold on. This happens a lot more frequently than what my brain can remember. I can't remember specific dates of when that happened. I can just kind of figure a general time frame. But so when I would ask people, what is this? What's going on? This is so weird. Is this just my weird brain? Or is this psychic ability? What is this? And people would say, you should write it down. You should write it down. And I was like, yeah. I always dismissed it. And now I'm kicking myself. But I do write things down now. So the benefit to writing things down is it doesn't have to be anything huge. You don't have to like have a big narrative or lots of paper. It can just be a small little journal where you just write a paragraph or two.
Right.
And so the way I use it is I just put a date and a time and the weird thing that happened. And
The weird thing that happened. Yeah.
yeah. And then when I go back and review it, it's like, whoa, okay, that happened before this, happened before this. And so it's more validating for myself that, okay, in the moment, I just observed and went, don't know what that was. But when you write it down, it's like, okay, these are happening for a reason. And like a good example would be probably last year in June or July, sometime around there, I had done a manifesting thing in one of my meditations where one of my specific things that I asked for was, I have significant children in my life I've worked with or that I know of. I want to run into them again. I feel like I've lost connection, and, please let me run into these kids I know are out there. And then probably a month or two later, I was at a grocery store and I hear this female voice come up from behind me and say, Lisa? And I turned around, I'm like, and I didn't recognize her at first. I was like, how do I know you? And she looked to be about 17 years old. And I was like, and she said, oh, I'm so-and-so. You were my PSR worker 9 years ago. And PSR stands for psychosocial rehabilitation. So
Mhm.
9 years ago, that's what my job was before I was a therapist. And she was a former client of mine. And she said, oh, I've been asking the universe to meet you again, because I really wanted to tell you, you made such an impact for me, like one of my teachers, but I've never got to tell you that when I was a kid. And, it turned out that, she's actually 21. And so I was like, oh, that's why I didn't recognize her. She looks so much younger
Yeah,
than what
sure.
I thought. But I didn't realize that connection until I had gone back and read my journal entries. And I was like, oh, I asked the universe to connect me with kids who were really special to me. And so even when it's something like that, it validates it for you, and it helps you order things in your mind. I'd be happy to take questions. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ask you one first, real quick,
Yeah, of course.
because I keep wanting to ask it, and then I forget, and I go, no, I got to ask that again.
Yeah.
Have you found with yourself and with the people you've worked with that they will tell you that they will think of someone like, I should call that person, and then they get distracted and they do something else, and sure enough, that person will call, maybe not that day, but tomorrow or the next. And the other thing is, you'll be in a room, you'll be having conversation with people, and you'll think to bring something up, and you think, I don't think I'm going to do that, and then they bring it up, and you start to notice every time you do that, they bring it up. At a certain point, it can no longer be coincidence. Have you run into that?
Yes. I've had that experience myself, and I've had a lot of clients either tell me about that or just people I know. Like my own experiences, of the personal romantic relationships that I've had. I've been in some long-term relationships where, after the relationship ends, I have no reason to believe that I would ever hear from that person again. And it would just happen to be that I would be hanging out with a family member or a friend, and my phone would ping, and it's the person we're talking about. Like someone I hadn't seen or talked to in months or maybe even years, but they suddenly just ping my phone. So it's like,
Yeah. We are psychic beings.
I literally have no reason to believe that you are thinking about me too.
Right.
But those things would happen.
Yeah.
I've been in session with clients where we're talking about someone really like poignant to what's going on for them, or someone they love, or someone they miss. And then in the middle of session, they'll get a phone call from that person. And so it's like, oh my God. So yeah, those happen all the time.
We have abilities, and it's interesting that Whitley's new book, The Fourth Mind, you need to read that book, because
I've been waiting for the paperback to come out. I mean,
it
because
is out. It is out. I got
is
it. I
it
just got it.
okay?
Yeah, you can order it from Amazon.
Okay,
Now, you
I've
should
got it
take
in
questions.
on my wish list to get it.
Yeah,
I'm not a Kindle person, so I
me
haven't
neither.
ordered it from Kindle yet.
No,
But
I like a book in my
yeah,
hands, and then I
me
can
too.
put it in my shelf with the other books of his. So,
Yeah.
if anyone would like to ask questions of Lisa, now's the time to do it. Now that the blabbermouth is shut up.
Which one?
So, questions. Or we'll start asking you questions. No questions. I would have thought that a lot of people here are always wanting to know about. Florida Man says, okay, about who to go to for hypnotherapy regarding getting back more information about things that they have experienced. There we go. You got one right there.
Okay. Yeah.
This person knows you, I believe.
I don't know if y'all just heard that. A weird crinkling just happened in my office.
Yes, I did.
I don't know what that was. I don't know who D. Ronfeld is. Yeah.
I don't either.
But my office is near BSU, so that makes sense. But my email is in the chat notes somewhere. So anyone who wants to reach out to me personally to just have a chat, or even if you don't want to be a part of if you don't want to be a part of the study, that's fine. I'm always open to chats about these topics with people. So you're welcome to email me if you wish.
You're getting questions now.
Yeah. So why the Ouija? Why does it work so well? What are we connecting to? Well, so I have mixed feelings on Ouija boards
I
because
think we
how
all
can
do.
something be a mass-produced item produced by a corporation that's sold in the toy aisle of Target? But then also so many anecdotal or, experiences people have with having unexpected, mysterious, and sometimes scary events. My personal theory on that is you've got a group of people connecting energies, and you're all focused on, some kind of shared desire to connect with a spirit or a disembodied entity of sorts. So you're increasing the electromagnetic fields, and therefore it makes it easier for something to move an object like a planchette. And then sometimes when people do Ouija work by themselves, same thing. They're directing their energy from here through their body, out their fingers to an object. And I've definitely seen those videos on the internet where the planchette goes flying off, or
It happened to me from both of our hands.
Mm.
We both had our hands on it, and it went flying across the room. And that was the last time we ever used one. You have another question.
Yeah. Encounters don't have to necessarily include abduction, or it can just be visitation in your home. It can be an experience you had in the woods. The abduction not required. It can be so the technicalities of the study are you have to identify, I've had ET contact, and it was after my ET contact that my psychic phenomena started. Because, sometimes I get the question of, well, is it chicken or egg? Are you psychic first and then you have ET encounters? And so that is another common thing I run into, where people are wondering, well, how do we know what actually happened first? So if in your working memory you have some kind of identifiable point of, hey, I didn't start to notice this until after I had the ET encounter, but I guess it could have happened before the ET encounter. But if you start to notice, because one thing that the book Beyond UFOs reported was 93% of people who have contact with ETs have multiple encounters. Only 7% of contactees have just a singular one and done, that's it, encounter. So for all these people who have multiple encounters, their psychic abilities tend to increase, or they develop new skills as time goes on. So it's not just a singular thing. It's something that has a starting point and develops. And so that's what qualifies for my study, is people who identify ET contact, then these things started happening. What do I think the orbs are?
Should he fill out your survey?
Oh, yeah. Filling out the survey, anyone can do it. The survey is designed to ask the technical questions that do qualify someone for the study. So if you're going through and you're answering and it says, oh, sorry, you don't qualify, then that happens. But yeah, if you can answer the questions and be like, yes, no, and then you make it through all the questions, it'll prompt you to another section that says, great, you qualify for the study. Here's the informed consent. Here are the bigger details of how this study is going to go. And do you consent to it? And if you do consent, please give me your name and contact information. And all of that is 100% private. No one gets to have that information except for me. So so that's how filling out the survey goes. And then the
orbs. What do you think?
The orbs. If you're referring to all of the orbs that have suddenly popped up in everybody's awareness since the end, like December of 2024, so for me, I'm surprised and delighted to see them, because from my own experiences, I'm always looking at the sky. I'm always looking for things that are out of the ordinary, that don't fit the category of airplane or helicopter or drone. Can't hear an engine. It doesn't move in the regular patterns that human-made craft does. And so in my home in smack dab in the middle of Boise, I see orbs over my house all the time. I point them out to people. I'm like, hey, what do you think that is? And they'll go, I don't know.
Isn't that something?
And then the orb will boop, and disappear.
Right.
And they'll go, oh, I guess the airplane turned around.
Yeah, it turned off all its lights. That's FAA required.
Yeah.
No,
so
but that's our nature to look at the sky all the time. I'm
Yes.
talking about you and me and everyone else here.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah. And so I think the more mass sightings, and it's not just America where it's happening, they're happening all over the world.
of course.
I think with our social media outlets, we're just seeing it more like on the shores of, or at the airports of New Jersey and New York. So my thoughts on it are, I definitely don't think they're made by humans, because you have something mysterious in the sky. Everyone can see them. They're photographed. They're filmed. I don't know if this is happening so much anymore, but for a while they were shutting down airports. And so then military or government or whatever went to examine them, and the official response was, no threat here.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, they're still shutting down flights.
Yeah, like Wright
Patterson. Flights can't land or take off. But no one has an answer for what are these things. I saw things in the media of, just regular people with their very fancy drones who are like, okay, well, I'll go and see what they are. And so then people with their own personal drones will then fly into the unauthorized airspace to go see what these orbs are.
Yeah,
and
you can see it on film.
And those people get nabbed pretty quickly by police for violating airspace. Yep. And so people with their own drones who want to go figure out what the orbs are getting in trouble for violating airspace. So it's like, well, why aren't you doing anything about the orbs? So those are my thoughts on the orbs. Is they're so weird, and they've popped up out of nowhere, and no one can seem to do anything about them. If it was human, someone would do something about it.
Yep. And every day there's more and more and more. And now you have another one here.
Yeah. Spiritual art therapy. So I don't technically do that. When I do art therapy with people, it usually is spontaneous. Like if someone says, oh my gosh, this amazing thing happened, even if it's not spirituality related. I've got blank pieces of paper. I've got colored pencils and pens and markers. And I say, hey, do you want to sketch it? And they'll just intuitively start doing it. So I guess that would be a form of spiritual art therapy. But it's the actual art therapy is not something I'm trained in. So I don't advertise to people, hey, let's do spiritual related art therapy. But I have a really good friend of mine who does spiritually guided art. And I have a lovely piece of art on my wall that sits behind my therapy couch that a friend of mine just kind of intuited and painted it. And it's so beautiful and everything that relates to my personal spiritual experiences. So I do definitely believe in that. I think it's very healing and very just spiritually integrating for people, but I don't technically do it myself. If it does come up, it's spontaneous and spur of the moment. The world's, I think, at some level. Yeah, thanks, Hermosa. Let's see. I do, and I have. I just can't say much about it. So if you happen to miss the top of the show, so I try not to give too many details about what my life experiences have been because I'm in the middle of conducting research. So I don't want to put narratives out there that then I don't want to give anybody a reason to say that my research isn't valid because I'm influencing people with my own stories. But I'm definitely willing to talk about it with people and share with people. Just, I don't want to put it out on the internet for people to then discredit my work.
Completely understandable. So,
yeah.
Wow, what amazing hour! Actually, we went over an hour, but that's great. No, it's fine. That's fine. Yeah. And we could go on like this for hours, but
I love talking about these things.
Nova says it's time to quit.
And they do have a way of letting us know.
Loud noises, and they're caused by people who are also spirits. Our next door neighbors are stomping up and down their stairs, scared the hell out of the dog and me. I jumped 10 feet. So, but wow, thank you so much, Lisa.
It was my
It's so nice
pleasure.
to meet you and take and get involved in your
Yeah.
study and make a new friend. It's really been a wonderful thing, and we'll have
Oh,
to have you back, and we need to stay in
likewise.
touch because
Oh,
we're
I hope so. It's been delightful to get to know you and to be able to talk about these things in a way that's in a one thing about I've noticed about your audience is they're very emotionally intelligent, thoughtful, engaging people, and I really love the community that you've built here around these topics. It's safe space for
it's
people
amazing.
to
It
explore.
took a little over a year, but it's growing even faster now, and it's amazing. Thank you
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
much.
thank you,
And
and
thank
thanks
you
to
everyone here for your
everybody who's
support and
listening.
your love, and we love you back a bunch. And
Yeah.
we'll see you again soon. Next week we
All
have another
right.
premiere. All right.
I'll be there for it. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye bye.